Hello, and thanks for joining me for Using Picture Books for Conversations with Teens on Race and Protests. I'm Leslie Zaroya, the Coordinator for Reading Language Arts at Los Angeles County Office of Education. Just a note, there are handouts attached to this module with the lesson sequence and all of the materials you will see referenced here. Don't forget to grab those. So talking about issues of race can be scary. We can be hesitant to open the proverbial Pandora's box to such a huge and complex issue. But here's the thing, our young people are witnessing history right now. They are embroiled in it and may even be participating in protests out in their communities. As educators, we can really seize this opportunity to have meaningful dialogue with teens, but in a safe and respectful environment. There really is a need to start the conversation, to show multiple perspectives and celebrate cultural identities and build bridges among students. Using picture books can be an awesome, non-threatening vehicle to do this. And for this module, I'm focusing on the Black experience and issues of race and protest for Black Americans. Representation matters. Black students need to see themselves in our curriculum. And what if you don't have any Black students? Then this matters probably even more. Students of other ethnicities need to learn about all races. When we don't understand and know about each other, it's easy to have civil unrest and otherize people. And as an added bonus, this lesson addresses lots of modalities and domains. It teaches analytical reading and critical thinking skills, along with promoting civil discourse and perspective taking. I also think it's fun, relevant, and accessible for students, especially in distance learning. So picture books may seem like something you wouldn't use much with older students, but they are not always written with tiny humans in mind. They often carry big themes, but the cool thing is that those themes are delivered in gentle ways that make it palatable in a short and powerful way. Here's the sequence, and we'll go through each one briefly. You will assign each group a different title to read and have students complete an individual review. Then they discuss in their groups and complete a group summary and prepare a presentation for the class on their book. Then there will be a whole group discussion of all of the titles and a rating process. Finally, students will write a final book review on the book of their choice. Let's go through each step in a little more detail. So in terms of assigning each group a different title to read, in distance learning this can be tricky. So I've collected 7 titles that all happen to be on YouTube, so kids can go there to have access to the book. There are some surprisingly awesome picture books on race, generally speaking, and also on activism. Each title here is read aloud, and the pictures are shown as well. All of these titles and links are on the lesson sequence handout attached to this module. First is Let's Talk About Race by Julius Lester. This story focuses on the many elements that make up a person and how race is one factor. Next is We March by Shane Evans. This book tells about the historic 1963 March on Washington. Then we have Anti-Racist Baby by Ibram Kendi. This book features 9 steps to building a more equitable world. Let the Children March by Monica Clark Robinson is also centered on the 1963 March on Washington, but sets a different tone and context than We March. It's interesting to compare the two. 1 Million Men and Me by Kelly Starling Lyons is a recounting of the 1995 Million Man March, but told through the eyes of a little girl who was with her father on that day. And then Something Happened in Our Town by Marianne Solano is a riveting account of a police shooting in a small town and how 2 families process it. It's so amazing. And finally, Daddy, There's a Noise Outside by Kenneth Braswell. This book is about 2 children who are awakened in the night by protests taking place out in their community. It's a great way to explain to young children about social injustice and why people protest. So these are the 7 books I selected. There are many others, but I felt these would spur discussion and be compelling to review. Now, each group of students becomes experts in their assigned book. They read it, or in this case watch it, and probably more than once to really get the sense of it. And here's an amazing resource for both teachers and students. Go to teachingbooks.net and look up each of these titles. Each one is on the site and has author interviews, book trailers, audio excerpts, and all kinds of other info about the book that you could also have students use. The site's free for all California educators and students. There are no licenses needed. You just sign up with your name and email. Check it out. You'll be so excited to see the wealth of resources related to over 7,000 titles. It's amazing. and it will provide so much more related to each of the books. I think students will have a better sense of why the author chose that topic and what it meant to him or her. Okay, so after students have explored the book and the related resources, students individually complete the book review form addressing the areas you see here. They will write a brief summary, talk about the characters and themes, look at the tone and style of the book, and they'll consider how the colors and illustrations impact the message, and reflect on the actual issue presented. Is it powerful? Is it age appropriate? They will also determine if it is a book they would recommend and explain their reasoning. Again, this handout is attached to the module. No need to recreate it. Once everyone has done their individual review, the students come together to discuss their assigned book. There's a group summary handout that can be put in Google Drive, and they can answer each of the sections on the form. After they've talked about their book and completed the summary sheet, they prepare to present it to the class. So these presentations can be as elaborate or as simple as you want to make it. Students could do a full-blown slide deck and in-depth analysis, or they could simply summarize key ideas for the class. It's up to you and how deep you want to take it. Before each group presents, I would have the class watch each YouTube video on the story, so they have a very clear understanding of the book being presented. It allows for exposure to all of the books. And kids like being experts on things, so the group presentations go over pretty well. Each book has a slightly different perspective, so there are lots of opportunities for discussion on a variety of issues. Once all of the groups have presented, a discussion is held on the strengths and weaknesses of each book, the messages and issues presented, and the impact and relevance of those issues. This is where some very interesting discussion can take place. As with any academic discussion, it's a great idea to have discussion norms and sentence starters for keeping the dialogue high level, engaging, and civil. Finally, students complete a rating sheet. This will help narrow the book they would like to select for their review, as well as the issue they would like to focus in on. The last step is for students to write a book review of one title. They may need a scaffold and/or a model of a book review to examine first. I created a simple outline template that can be used to scaffold the process. Feel free to tweak it to your liking. I also like to pick a focus skill for each writing assignment, something like using transition words or introducing titles and authors effectively. You can choose whatever skill you know students need more work with. It would also be fun to maybe create a class Flipgrid of students' recorded book reviews, or have students create a podcast episode where they examine all 7 books and make recommendations. It doesn't have to end with a written book review. There are lots of other things you can do to give students some choice in how they demonstrate understanding. I'd also like to mention that this lesson hits every domain: reading, writing, speaking, listening, and language, as well as just about all of the ELD standards. Students are actively engaged in all the domains, but in a fun and purposeful way. And because the final product is a book review or video or podcast, the product has meaning and can be viewed by others. As I mentioned at the top, there's a handout attached to this module with all of these items. Why reinvent the wheel? But of course, feel free to customize in any way that you want. Thanks so much for listening. I hope you feel you can use picture books as a vehicle to talk about important issues going on in our communities. And as always, feel free to reach out if we can be of any assistance. Take care.